All right, let's be honest here. How many of you listening have started something and just never quite gotten around to finishing it?
Hmm.
I know I'm definitely guilty of that. It's like there's this graveyard of abandoned projects in the back of my mind. Guitar lessons, that Spanish chord. I swore I'd finish that novel that's been sitting half written for like a year.
Oh, yeah, the struggle is real.
Totally.
Yeah.
And don't even get me started on those workout routines that lasted all of 2 weeks. But hey, that's why we're here today for this deep dive. We're going to try to figure out why finishing things can feel like climbing Mount Everest, even when we start out so gung-ho, right?
Absolutely. And the interesting thing is it's not just a matter of willpower or discipline like a lot of people think. There's actually some pretty fascinating science behind why we're wired to find finishing things so much tougher than starting them.
Okay, so you're telling me there's like a legitimate reason why I'm a serial project starter, but not so much a finisher? Come on, spill the beans. Is there any hope for me?
Well, there's always hope, but yeah, our brains are kind of playing tricks on us. The source material we're looking at today talks about this thing called the goal gradient effect. Have you ever heard of that?
Goal gradient effect. It sounds kind of intimidating.
It's not as complicated as it sounds. Basically, imagine you're at the top of a hill. The starting line of a race is right there at the peak. And the finish line, well, that's all the way down at the bottom.
Okay, I'm picturing it.
Now, when you first take off running, you get this huge rush of excitement, right? It's downhill, you're moving fast, the wind's in your hair. That's dopamine kicking in, that feel-good chemical our brains love.
The fuel of so many of life's questionable decisions.
Exactly. But here's the catch. As you get closer and closer to the finish line, that downhill slope starts to level out. The excitement fades a bit. And guess what? That dopamine rush we were riding, it starts to diminish too.
So basically my brain is like, woohoo, new project, let's go. And then halfway through, it's like, wait a minute, this is actually work now. Where's the next shiny thing?
Pretty much. And that's the goal gradient effect in a nutshell. Our brains are wired to prioritize the novelty and that initial excitement of starting something new way more than the sustained effort it takes to actually see it through to the end.
So you're telling me it's like built into our biology to be drawn to the start of things and then kind of lose steam along the way.
You got it. It's a very human thing.
Okay. I'm starting to understand why my to-do list looks the way it does. But wait a minute. If this is how our brains are wired, how come some people actually manage to finish things? Are they like superheroes with special dopamine-resistant brains?
Not quite superheroes, but you bring up a good point. Some people are definitely better at finishing things than others. And it's not because they're immune to this goal gradient effect. It's more like they've figured out ways to work with it or maybe even outsmart it.
So it's like a mental game then.
In a way, yeah. It's about recognizing those patterns in ourselves, those moments when our motivation starts to dip, and then figuring out strategies to keep ourselves engaged.
Makes sense. And speaking of things that make it harder to stay focused, our source material also talks about how social media plays a role in all of this, right?
Oh, yeah, definitely. Think about it. We're constantly bombarded with new ideas, new trends, new opportunities. It's like every 5 seconds there's another start this business or learn that skill or become a millionaire by next Tuesday ad popping up.
Don't even get me started on those.
Yeah.
It's like my entire inbox is a graveyard of unfinished online courses that I signed up for with the best of intentions.
Right. It's that initial excitement again. We get hooked by the promise of quick results, instant expertise. But then reality sets in, we realize it's actually going to take time and effort, and boom, our brains are already on the lookout for the next dopamine hit.
It's like a vicious cycle.
It really is. And social media can definitely amplify that cycle by constantly feeding our need for novelty.
Okay, so we've talked about the science behind why finishing things is so hard. And we've touched on how social media can make things even trickier. But let's get to the good stuff. Is there any hope for us chronic non-finishers? Does our source offer any solutions?
It does. Some of the advice is pretty classic stuff, you know? Setting deadlines, breaking down big goals into smaller, more manageable steps. There's also the whole just grit your teeth and power through it approach.
Yeah, the willpower method. I've tried that one. It usually lasts for about 5 minutes before I'm back to scrolling through cat videos on the internet.
Right. It's not always the most sustainable strategy. So what if instead of trying to fight our natural wiring, we try to work with it a bit?
Ooh, I like where you're going with this.
Remember how we talked about our brains loving novelty? Well, what if we found ways to inject more novelty and excitement into the process of working towards a goal?
Give me an example.
Sure. Let's say you're trying to write a novel. Instead of thinking about it as this huge, overwhelming task, break it down into smaller, more manageable mini goals, like write 500 words today or finish this chapter by the weekend. each time you hit one of those mini goals. Celebrate it. Give yourself a small reward. It's like those dopamine hits we were talking about.
So it's like tricking my brain into staying motivated by giving it those little bursts of excitement along the way.
Exactly. And there are other ways to tap into that novelty-loving part of our brains, too. You could try gamifying your progress. There are tons of apps and tools out there designed to do just that. Or you could find an accountability buddy, someone who's working towards a similar goal, and you can check in with each other and celebrate your wins together.
I love these ideas. Like instead of trying to become some kind of super disciplined robot, we're figuring out how to work with our natural tendencies and make the journey to the finish line more enjoyable.
That's the key. It's not about forcing ourselves to do things we hate. It's about finding ways to make the process more fun and engaging.
This has been so insightful. I'm already feeling more optimistic about tackling some of those abandoned projects. So for everyone listening out there, think about that one thing you've been putting off. Maybe it's learning a new language, finally finishing that painting, or even just cleaning out your closet. Whatever it is, I challenge you to think about how you can apply some of these ideas to make the journey to the finish line a little bit more exciting. Maybe it's time to outsmart that goal gradient effect and finally achieve that goal you've been dreaming of.
I think so too. And remember, it's not about perfection, it's about progress.
Couldn't have said it better myself. All right, folks, that's it for our deep dive today. Hope you learned something new and maybe even feel a little bit more empowered to tackle those unfinished projects.
Until next time, happy finishing.
Happy finishing.